Mentioned this morning that without Jesus, without the judgment, our lives don't matter. And that's true to a certain extent. It's also in some ways not true. Because the things that we do on this earth matter. We can't ever forget that. The idea of our works following us is stated in a couple of different places we're going to look at tonight. And it's a reminder for us that the things that we do matter. They make a difference. And the reason they make a difference, of course, is that there's going to be a judgment one day. And so without Jesus and without the judgment, everything would be useless and hopeless and vain. But with Jesus, everything matters. And we can't take it for granted that we are going to be just fine. Our works really don't matter. We can't take it for granted that we won't have the influence on other people. There was a man who said, as a joke, he said, everyone makes a room of people smile. Some people make the room smile when they enter the room. Some people make the room smile when they leave the room. There are a lot of things that we say about that kind of situation, right? One of the things I recently heard, so true, is that the things that you do will not be remembered. The way you make them feel will. Another one was, if you think about your past, it's easier, much, much easier to remember the things that someone said to you that hurt you than it is to remember the things that someone said that lifted you up. And so we have a tendency when we look back at our past to think that the majority of people have said bad things about us, and we don't remember the good things. And it should be a reminder to all of us to be careful with our words, because one small action or word can have a big impact on other people, maybe more than we realize. So none of us are perfect. None of us are going to be perfect, but we all try to be better, and then we think about the way that we behave and our behaviors, how they affect other people. That's a very important concept. The Bible says a lot about that. There are 4 ways, actually, that our works would follow us. The first one would be our legacy. The impact that you have will continue after you're dead. And that's something we want to build. We want to build a legacy. And that's a very popular term in today's environment. I see a lot of gurus on Facebook and other places telling us that, you want to have a legacy and you want to live beyond your years. You want to do something that's going to make an impact from now on. And they say it's forever, but it's never going to be forever. But you will impact people after you're gone. People will remember you. People will look at you. Your impact will continue on the earth. Now, whether it's positive or negative, that's another story. But it is a fact. There will be people who will remember and be affected because of the way you lived your life. We also have the consequences that follow us. So your reward or punishment continues forever. That's kind of sobering, isn't it? And that we live, and as Christians we know this, but we live our lives so often not worried about the consequences for hereafter. We also have our testimony. Your priorities, the things that you put as first, are going to be felt long after your death. Your family will be impacted by it. Your friends will be impacted by it. And they can either be encouraged to continue doing what they know is right because of your testimony, or your testimony may encourage them to stay away or be discouraged from doing what is right. And then last would be the eternal significance. Whatever impact we have on other people, it can and will last for eternity. Now, that doesn't mean that if we have a negative impact on someone, that they will necessarily be impacted forever, but it's still going to be a part of the puzzle. It's still going to be a part of the things. Their impact on their life, the people in their lives, is going to be partly due to the impact that you made upon them. And we can see that so clearly when we look at generations of families and the cycles that tend to not be broken. And the parents have children who desperately don't want to be anything like their parents, and they end up being just like them. and we see a ruthless cycle in so many ways. And those can be broken. There are many examples of that being broken, but it's difficult and it takes effort. And the breaking of that chain is something that actually will help for future generations. So what you're doing has eternal significance. With those things in mind, it should help us remember how important it is in the decisions that we make. There's nothing that we say that's arbitrary, that's nothing, it's useless. Because at the very least, it tells people what our priorities are. And so we need to make very careful decisions in how we live and what we do and how we balance our lives. And none of us can tell each other all the details of how we should live, but we can all expect and look at each other and remind one another, hey, we have things to accomplish that are God's will, and we have a life to live and an influence and an impact of our lives. So 3 lessons that we can learn from this idea. From those 4 things give us 3 lessons. One is that your actions have consequences. We already know that. Look in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 24, because he's talking about that very thing here. And of course, you remember this is the letter that was written to Timothy from Paul. And he was in Ephesus. Timothy was in Ephesus, and he was hoping that he would remain there and teach people not to teach false ideas, and that he would correct ideas that were being taught, and he would help support the eldership and all kinds of things that were going on. And Paul wanted to make sure that Timothy understood his role and his function, and that was not an easy place to be, because there was a lot of work, and it took a lot of boldness. Some people believe that Timothy was a meek and shy person because Paul mentioned several times that he needed to be bold. And it's possible that he was. But whether you're bold or not in personality, you want to be told this is what is required. And so there are times when we have to say things and do things that other people may not appreciate or like. So Timothy was told to be that very thing. And he's given warnings in here about how he should treat the elders and how he should treat the people who make accusations against the elders. And he's reminding them, actually, if you look through here, he's simply reminding him of Matthew chapter 18. Don't receive an accusation against the elders except with 2 or 3 witnesses. Well, you shouldn't receive an accusation about anyone unless there's witnesses involved. He's just simply reminding them this is how you treat the elders, and this is how you would treat everyone. And he's talking about in verse 22, not to lay hands hastily on anyone or share in people's sins. Keep yourself pure. The laying on of hands, I used to think that meant laying on of hands to like throw them out. But I think what he's talking about is appointing elders, not to do that swiftly, not to do it quickly, but to take your time, not to do it hastily, but also don't share in other people's sins, because there can be sin related to those kinds of things. It's another topic. But here are the things that he's telling him. And then so in verse 24, he said, some men's sins are clearly evident, preceding them to judgment, but those of some men follow later. Likewise, the good works of some are clearly evident, and those that are otherwise cannot be hidden. You see, sometimes we have those things, those people in our lives, that we can see very clearly that they're good or they're evil. And sometimes people cleverly hide both. And we don't always know. That's part of the reason that he told Timothy to take his time in appointing elders. It's part of the reason that we need to take our time in dealing with one another and not jump to conclusions. We don't see or know everything. And we have to recognize that. So he tells him, reminds him, some things, though, are clearly evident, and some things then are going to follow them much later. We don't find out until maybe after they've even passed away. Our actions, though, always have consequences, and people learn. And people will see the things that we do. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 13 is the other place where this idea is expressed. And this is a blessing that was given. In verse 13 it says, I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them. You see, we serve a God who is not negligent to see what you do. We know that we are not going to go to heaven because we're good enough or we're perfect enough. But even though we're not going to go to heaven because of our perfection, God still sees the things that we do. He knows the actions, activities, and He says these things will follow. Jesus talked about that very thing, about putting your treasures in heaven. We live for later because we know that God sees, that He appreciates in some sense. He will reward for the things that we do, the way that we live. And it's easy for us to get discouraged and think, well, He doesn't even notice. No one sees the things that I do, but God always does. And you remember how in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus told them, warned the people that when you pray, to make sure you go into a closet. Not that it's wrong to have public prayer. We have public prayer all over the Bible. Jesus said public prayer. But His point was, you don't do it so that you can be seen, so people can pat you on the back and say, oh, you did such a good job. He said, you've received your reward. The same thing with giving to other people. You don't do it so that other people notice it. Your intention is not, hey, look at me, look at all the stuff I'm doing. Your intention is simply to serve God. If people notice it, fine. If not, fine, because you're not trying to please other people. That's the way our attitude should be. You're not trying to make other people impressed with how good you are. You're trying to please your Father in heaven. If that's your attitude, then it doesn't really matter if people notice or not. And one of the best ways for you to determine your motives, and let me tell you, motives are tricky things. One of the best ways for you to determine your motives and the activities that you do is to judge whether to do something and see whether or not you get upset if no one says anything about it. Why would you be upset unless you're trying to please them? Now, we all need appreciation. We all need encouragement is the right word. Maybe not appreciation. We all need appreciation and encouragement. But it shouldn't be because we're doing it for that. And we have we have a lot of things in our culture. We show appreciation in different ways. But if you're doing something for the applause of men, you're not doing it for the right reasons. But our actions, according to this, will continue after our death. They matter. We also learn a second lesson, and that is that judgment is universal. Those things about our activities, our actions, that means that all of us will have a judgment, whether those things are good or evil. And the judgment is going to come in some ways naturally because the way we behave, we're going to have results that come from that. And so the judgment is universal. There's not a person who can escape this one fact, and that is the things that you sow is what you'll reap. One day we're going to all see, right? We may fool a lot of people, but in the end, everyone will know. And if you don't want people to know now, it's best to tell it now. Get it out of your system. Talk about it. Let people know up front, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is the life that I live. Be open about it, because if not, it's going to be openly said to everyone later. God will show who we are. And it's better to confront it now on this side of eternity where we can do something about it than later when we can do nothing about it. Look at different passages. Look at Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 27. It tells us it's set for man to die once, and after that the judgment. Our death is certain. The only reason that we'd get out of it is if Jesus returned. And even then, we're still going to face Him. And when we die, I don't know how everything's going to work. I know there's the Hadean realm. We have the place of torments, and we have the place of paradise. And Jesus told, for example, Jesus said that the thief on the cross would be with Him in paradise that day. And so that day they were together in paradise before Jesus came back to earth to be resurrected. But we have paradise, and we also have Hades, the part of Hades that's the torments, and that's from Luke chapter 16. We see the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man was in torments after his death. And so we know that those things exist. I don't know what it's going to look like. I know it's going to be very different places to be. But after that, we have a judgment. Our works matter. And the things that we do here, good or evil, we face judgment about. And that's really the judgment. Are they good or evil? we also need to recognize that our character is going to be revealed. And we talked about the character. We talk about our actions, but our actions reveal character. Our character is revealed later, and it's also revealed now by the way we behave. So here are ways that we can say that our character is revealed. Our character is revealed by our actions. Look in Matthew chapter 7. Jesus had quite a bit to say about our hearts, our character, the way we behave. In Matthew chapter 7, verses 16 through 20. See, he said, beware of false prophets in verse 15, and he's giving us ways that we can know, but this applies to anyone for anything. This is how we can determine how we are and how other people are as well. We can see them by their actions. He said, you will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them. Now and then you may have run into certain people. I've run into well, I'm not going to talk about that. I've known people who presented themselves in one way and behaved in a different way outside of public. Have you ever met someone like that? And if you told people on the outside, this person is really not as good as you think he is, they wouldn't believe you because of the way they present themselves. But if you look and you watch and you actually see their behavior, you see what I'm talking about. We've known people like that. And sometimes we recognize that people don't always present themselves with the way that they really are. But if we will look carefully, we can know. You know, it's similar to when you see on the news when people are talking about some man who had been murdering people for decades, and they're talking to their neighbor. So I never would have thought. Well, you didn't see how the man behaved. God does. But your character will be revealed by the way you act, the things that you do. And we can fool one another for a little while, but only for a little while. And then we have to face the facts of who we really are. And if you want to change your life, the only way that your life is going to change is if you confront who you are. And you can only see who you are by looking at what you do, not what you intend to do, and not what you feel like your thought processes are. Not what your intentions are or anything like that. We judge everyone else by the way they behave, and we judge ourselves by what we intend. But your intentions are is not what makes you who you are. Your actions are what makes you who you are. And so we must look at ourselves honestly and see, how am I behaving? When things go bad in life, how do I behave? That's a great test. When things are going well in life, how do I behave? That's another great test. And we ought to be in the two extremes. We ought to see the same person in both extremes. But sometimes we don't see the same person in both extremes. If we don't see ourselves the same when we're suffering as we do when the same actions when we're suffering as we have when things are going well, that's a sign to us that we are not seeing ourselves completely. We need to look into the mirror, analyze our actions, and ask ourselves, why am I not the same? Why am I not consistent? And I tell you what, I don't know about you, but for me, consistency has been the number one difficulty in my Christian walk. Staying consistent in the good times and the bad times. Man, I see some people that are so good at that. And I marvel. It has to do with our habits. It has to do with our intentions. It has to do with what we're focusing on. It also has to do with whether or not we can force ourselves or make ourselves or know ourselves well enough to coerce ourselves to take that step when we know we can't do it, but we do it anyway. Your character is revealed by your actions. Another thing that reveals our characters are words. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 20. You know, this is something that gets all of us. James 3 says that there's none of us who have a perfect tongue, perfect control over it. And I tell you what, I understand that. Book of Proverbs says, where there's many words, sin is not absent. I think about that a lot when I'm standing up here. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 20. says, the tongue of the righteous is choice silver, and the heart of the wicked is worth little. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. It's valuable. Why? Because of the way that we use our words are so helpful for one another. And we understand that words are not simply words. They're not all. We communicate with more than just words. We communicate with body language. We communicate with the way we use our eyes, the way we use our mouths, the faces that we make when we're talking to other people. There is so much that is involved in communication. Some people have said that, and people smarter than me have said that up to 80% of your communication process is things that are not words. Your body language, the way you hold yourself, the tone of voice that you have when you're saying things, your consistency in saying things and how they're said. All these things show our value and our worth. If we want to be worthwhile, we need to have words that are like from the wise. They're like choice silver. And isn't that a challenge? To make everything that we say, all the ways that we communicate, to be one of love. That's a challenge. It's not always something that we're up to, but it will show who we are. So if you want to see yourself, look at your way you behave, but also look at the way you communicate to other people. That will reveal some things about yourself that you may not realize are there. Another one is our beliefs. Look in Colossians chapter 3. It doesn't specifically mention here beliefs, but it's the same attitude, the same idea. In Colossians chapter 3. It says, if then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. You see, the things that we choose to believe in, those are what will define our character. We can believe what God said. We can put our trust and our hope in Him. For example, we're facing challenges and difficulties. We can put our trust in Him to know that He will never leave us or forsake us. Or we can choose not to put our trust in Him and panic and worry and fret. Those are decisions that we make. And the way that we behave, the way that we react to the negative things of life shows us who we are. We look to God, or do we look to ourselves? Do we worry to death, or are we concerned and take it to our Father in heaven? Our character is revealed by the way we believe about this life. Also by our priorities. Look in Matthew chapter 6. Our priorities show us who we are. You know, I've met a lot of people who said they loved God. You have too. And we've been in the same boat. So we're not looking down on anyone. But we've all met people who said, man, I want so bad to go to church. I want so bad to have God in my life. But I don't really want to leave this out. I need to be here instead. When we put God first, that means there's nothing more important. Nothing can get in the way. And so we have to adjust our priorities to make God fit where He belongs. It's not always easy. Sometimes we have to make changes in our lives that take time to come about. But we still need to make the changes, and we do it based upon what's most important. Carl and I have a saying that, when we're doing things, and it's true, it's not meant as a judgment, but this is just absolutely the way it is. If people want to be there, they will be there. I mean, that's it. If we don't want to be there, we're not going to be there. Whether that's church or activities, it doesn't matter. And we don't have to be involved in everything. It doesn't mean that if you're not involved in something, I happen to be there and you're not, that I'm looking at. That's not the point at all. But if it's a priority, if God is first in your life, you're going to be there when He wants you to be there. You'll be doing the things that He wants you to do. In Matthew chapter 6, 19 through 21, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where the moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, treasure is whatever it is in life that we value. That's a treasure. So if we treasure the trinkets of this world, the money of this world, we're going to put that first. If our treasure is money and silver and riches, that's where our heart's going to be. Your heart chases your treasure. You get to determine what your treasure is. You don't get to determine what your heart does, what your heart chases. Your heart chases your treasure. It always chases the treasure. You can't change that. So the only way you can change the direction of your heart is to change what you treasure. So Jesus said, where your heart will be, there, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So if you treasure God above all else, your heart is going to follow along. I remember early in my Christianity saying this a lot. I remember praying, Lord, I don't really have any enthusiasm for you, but I want to have. Help me have it. Have you ever been there? And the way you get out of that is to start treasuring God again. When you put God as your number one treasure in life, everything else will fall in place. There are always going to be exceptions. There are always going to be times where we can't do things that we wish we could do. We as humans, we are failures. And as humans, we're weak. Physically, emotionally, mentally. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up, but we need to recognize, ask the questions. Am I not there? Am I not doing because of good reason, or am I just seeking something else? See, there's a difference, isn't there? Your character is revealed by your priorities. And the last one, the last idea here is that your character is revealed by your desires. Very similar to this, the treasures, but in Matthew chapter 7, he says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. There's so many times where we may miss out on the blessings of God because we're not looking for them. We're not asking for them. We're seeking something else. God may help you find whatever it is you're seeking, but just be sure that when you find it, it's actually what you want. Because so many times we find those things in life that we think we want, and we get them and we realize they're just dust. But we've spent years and years trying to find a way to make it happen. It's like a mirage. The closer you get, the further away it seems to be. But if your desire is to seek God, you will always find Him, without question. This is about our works. And the things that we seek, our character, is what impacts other people around us. And we're always in the need of self-assessment. And it's something we don't do well. And it's something that we don't tend to do often. But we should often sit down and assess ourselves. How am I thinking? What am I doing? Where are my weaknesses? Where are my strengths? Am I living in accordance with God's will or not? What are my actions telling me? If I saw someone else living my actions, what would I think of them? Be hard on yourself. It's okay. And then take it to Jesus. Because ultimately, we can't control everything. And you can't do anything, and I can't do anything about the fact that we have sin in our lives. Except go to God and ask for forgiveness. And pray that He will strengthen us so next time we face it, we'll overcome it. This evening, if you need any help from the congregation, you need prayers of the church or anything, we're here for you. We want to be supportive. You need to be baptized for the remission of your sins or just need prayers of the church. Whatever it is that we can help you with, please come as we stand and sing.